The street looked like every other quiet street in upstate New York. Rows of trimmed lawns, maple trees shedding early autumn leaves, and the occasional porch light flickering on as families settled into their nightly routines. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved when driving past, where kids played basketball in shared driveways, and where nothing truly bad had ever happened, at least not yet. Inside the two-story home at the end of Hawthorne Lane, Aarav Mehta adjusted the collar of his jacket while glancing at his reflection in the hallway mirror. His face looked tired, shadows under his eyes, hair slightly out of place, a stiffness in his jaw that hadn't been there years ago. Life had begun to press on him in ways he didn't like to admit, even to himself. "Leaving already?" Maya asked from the living room couch. Her voice was casual, but beneath it was a brittle undertone, one that Aarav had learned not to question too deeply. Their marriage had once been full of warmth and easy conversation, but over the past year something colder had settled between them. Not enough to erupt into arguments, just enough to make everything feel slightly off. "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile. "Poker night. You know how the guys get if I'm late." Maya nodded without looking up. She was helping their 8-year-old daughter Lily color a picture of a forest. Lily glanced up at her father with wide, excited eyes. "Daddy, can we go for ice cream tomorrow?" she asked. Aarav bent down, kissing the top of her head. "Of course, sweetheart. Tomorrow for sure." He meant it. Or he hoped he did. Lately, promises felt easier to make than to keep. He grabbed his keys from the counter. The metal jingle filled the silent room. Maya's eyes flickered toward him, then back to Lily. A subtle tension hung in the air, not quite anger, not quite sadness, something harder to define. "Call me when you're on your way back," she murmured. "Sure." He stepped out into the crisp night air and exhaled. Inside the house, the weight of unspoken words always seemed to cling to him. Outside, under the quiet hum of the neighborhood, he could breathe. He walked to his silver SUV, started the engine, and drove off toward his co-worker's house 10 minutes away. Inside, the living room felt abruptly still after the door shut. The house wasn't noisy, but without Aarav's presence, the silence thickened around Maya like a blanket she hadn't asked for. She watched Lily carefully color within the lines, her small fingers moving with intense concentration. Maya ran her hand across her daughter's hair. "Let's get you ready for bed in a bit, okay?" "But I'm not sleepy," Lily protested. "You never are," Maya teased softly. They shared a small laugh, one of the few moments that still felt untouched by everything else happening around Maya's life. She loved her daughter fiercely. If the world outside crumbled, she knew Lily would be a reason to keep moving. But tonight, something felt different. A faint rustling noise came from outside, like leaves brushing against the siding or footsteps on gravel. Maya paused. She lifted her head slightly, listening. Nothing. She brushed it off. Old houses made noises, wind made noises, her own anxiety made noises too. "Mommy," Lily asked, "what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart, just tired." Eyes drifted toward the living room window, where the curtains were slightly parted. Beyond the glass, only the glow of the porch light lit the dark. She couldn't see anything clearly, but the sense of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. She stood and walked toward the window, pulling the curtain a little wider. The yard looked still, the street quiet, the porch empty. Maybe she was being paranoid. She exhaled and reached to close the curtain fully when something moved. A dark shape glided across the windowpane, fast enough to miss if she blinked, slow enough for her breath to catch in her throat. She froze. Someone, or something, was outside. Maya's heart was still racing from the shadow she had glimpsed at the window. She drew the curtain fully shut, telling herself it was just her imagination. The night was quiet, after all, and Hawthorne Lane had always been safe. Lily, unaware of the tension threading through her mother, continued coloring her forest scene. The crayons squeaked against the paper as Maya tried to focus on the mundane, trying to convince herself that everything was fine. From a few miles away, Aarav laughed across the table, a pile of chips in front of him. The warmth of camaraderie filled the air, the way it always did on Tuesday nights. Glasses clinked, and the occasional joke earned a ripple of laughter. For Aarav, poker night was a sanctuary, a time to escape the slow, burning strain that had settled into his marriage. He didn't notice the text that blinked briefly on his phone screen or the number he didn't recognize. He silenced it quickly, letting it vanish without a second thought, unaware of the storm brewing back home. Back at the house, Lily paused mid-stroke and pressed her small hands against the rug. "Mom, I hear someone outside," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Maya froze, her heart skipping a beat. She crouched beside her daughter and tried to steady her own breathing. "It's probably nothing, honey. Maybe just the wind," Maya said, forcing a calm tone, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She reached the window again, peering through the blinds into the darkened yard. The shadows of the trees shifted as a breeze rustled their leaves, and for a moment, Maya almost convinced herself she was imagining it again. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold, a metallic creak from the garage door. Slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. Her pulse quickened. Whoever, or whatever had been outside now had a way in. She crouched lower, pulling Lily close. The little girl clung to her mother, eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that too?" Maya asked softly. Lily nodded. "It's near the garage, a man. I think a man is there." Maya's stomach twisted. She had heard enough true crime stories to know that dismissing this could be dangerous. She tried the rational voice again. "Maybe it's just a raccoon, or the neighbor's cat." Lily shook her head. "No, it's big like Dad." The comparison made Maya's blood run colder. Her hands trembled slightly as she moved toward the living room, thinking of the lock on the door, the keys on the counter. Every instinct screamed to call Aarav immediately, but she stopped herself. He was miles away, and she didn't want to alert Lily too much. The footsteps shifted. They weren't slow now. They moved across the gravel outside, purposeful, measured. Maya's mind raced. Could it be a burglar? A neighbor? Someone else entirely? The rational voice faltered under the weight of instinct. Meanwhile, across town, Aarav's phone buzzed on the table. A call from an unknown number flashed across the screen. He glanced at it briefly, hesitated, and then silenced it without answering. A small frown crossed his face as he returned to the game, unaware that the connection between that call and his home would soon be catastrophic. Back at the Mehta residence, Maya heard another sound, a scraping noise near the garage handle. Panic clawed at her chest. She grabbed Lily's hand, ready to retreat upstairs, when Lily froze in place, her small voice shaking. "Mom," she whispered, eyes wide. Someone just came inside." Maya's heart stopped. The garage door, the footsteps, the shadow outside. All of it had been leading to this moment. Every rational thought fled. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. She could hear Lily's tiny breaths, quick and uneven, as they both realized that the danger was no longer outside. It was inside. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with something dark and inevitable. The night that began as ordinary, quiet, and familiar had already shifted into something unrecognizable. And neither mother nor daughter could have known how close the intruder was, how well he knew the layout, or how far this night would spiral into horror. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The small voice of her daughter still trembled behind her. "Someone inside," Lily had whispered, and now the reality of that phrase slammed into her. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but the house felt suddenly alien, every corner suspicious, every shadow alive. Her mind raced as she moved cautiously down the narrow hallway, clutching Lily's hand, heart hammering. Then she saw him, a figure masked and silent, emerge from the living room doorway. The face was obscured by a black ski mask, but his movements were deliberate, confident, as though he had walked these floors hundreds of times. Maya's stomach dropped. He knew the house, he knew the layout. She tried to shout, but her voice caught in her throat. The man's gloved hand raised, holding a heavy object, metal gleaming faintly in the dim light. Lily pressed herself against the wall near her bedroom door, too terrified to move. She watched as her mother took a tentative step forward, trying to shield her child. Maya's mind screamed that they had to survive, that somehow they had to escape, but fear constricted her every thought. "Stay behind me, Lily," Maya whispered, voice tight. The intruder lunged, swift and brutal. Maya stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the first strike. The object, the handle of a mallet or hammer, crashed against the wall beside her, splintering the wooden molding. She grabbed at the man's arm, trying to wrest it away, but he was stronger than she expected. Each strike that missed her left a sickening echo through the hallway. From her vantage point, Lily could see her mother struggle, her small frame pressed against the doorframe, her face a mixture of panic and determination. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks, but she didn't run. She couldn't. Fear rooted her in place, and all she could do was watch why died as the violence unfolded just feet from her. Meanwhile, across town, Aarav's laughter from the poker table had faded into the background of his own mind. He leaned back, picking up his phone again, the screen lighting up with a new text from an unknown number. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, but curiosity, or something darker, forced him to peek. His eyes flicked over the brief message, coordinates, a time, a single sentence that made his stomach twist. He quickly slid the phone back into his pocket, forcing a smile as the dealer shuffled the cards. Nobody at the table noticed, but inside, his mind raced with the consequences that had yet to unfold. Back at the house, the masked intruder cornered Maya near the staircase. She swung her free arm wildly, trying to push him back, but he was relentless. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized her own strength would not be enough. She needed a plan, any plan. The object came down again, narrowly missing her head. Her mind flashed to Lily, pressed against the wall, trembling. "You're not taking her," Maya cried, voice raw with desperation. The man paused, and for a split second, the hallway was silent except for their ragged breathing. Then he spoke, a line that cut through Maya's fear like a knife. "You always ruin the plan, just like last time." Maya froze. The words were familiar, intimate in a way that made her stomach turn. This wasn't just a random intruder. He knew more than he should have. The familiarity in the tone, the choice of words, the casual precision. They were not random. Lily's small voice quivered from the doorway. "Mom, he's saying something. He knows him." Maya's eyes narrowed. Her mind tried to piece it together, to understand who could know the house, know them, and know the phrase. Whoever this was, he wasn't acting alone. He wasn't a stranger. A single bead of sweat ran down Maya's temple as she realized the horror of the situation. Someone close to Aarav, someone who had access, had planned this attack. The weight of betrayal pressed down on her chest. Every detail from the past weeks, the late nights, the subtle secrets, the glances that had felt off, napped into place like pieces of a terrible puzzle. The intruder advanced again, mallet raised, and Lily's hand shot out instinctively, grabbing the edge of the doorframe. Maya twisted toward her daughter, ready to shield her, but the man's voice cut through the tension again, this time closer, almost taunting. "Didn't think I'd see this coming, did you?" Maya's mind raced, heart pounding. The phrase, the voice, the familiarity. Only one person she knew could have said that line. One person she had trusted, and one person who could make this nightmare personal. And in that instant, the world shifted from fear to cold, paralyzing realization. Aarav drove through the empty streets, unaware that every passing street lamp cast shadows over the nightmare that had already begun in his own home. The laughter and card clatter from earlier now felt distant, trivial, almost unreal. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he thought of Maya and Lily. Something in the pit of his stomach nagged him, a fleeting, irrational worry, but he shoved it away. By the time he pulled into the driveway at exactly 12:22 a.m., the house appeared calm, silent, ordinary, but inside, chaos had claimed every corner. He opened the front door and froze. The smell hit him first, a coppery, metallic tang that made his stomach twist. The living room was a war zone. Furniture lay overturned, the rug torn and stained, broken glass glinting faintly under the faint moonlight streaming through the windows. And in the center of it all, Maya lay unmoving on the floor. Her hair, splayed around her head like a dark halo, was damp with sweat and flecked with blood. "Mom," Lily screamed from the top of the staircase. Her small frame trembled violently as she clutched the banister, her eyes wide with unspeakable terror. "Help, someone hurt Mommy." Aarav's legs moved before his mind could catch up. He knelt beside Maya, checking her pulse, pressing his hands against her chest, whispering her name in a rush of fear and disbelief. She was breathing, but shallowly, her eyes fluttered open, revealing a glaze of pain and confusion. "Call, someone, please." She managed to croak, barely audible. Aarav's voice, strangely calm, carried through the room. "It's okay, I've got you. Just hang on." He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911, his tone steady, almost eerily controlled. He gave the address, explained the situation, and stayed on the line, repeating reassurances to Maya. Meanwhile, Lily clung to the stair railing, sobbing, unable to look away from the sight of her mother sprawled across the floor. Her small fingers were stained faintly with blood as she tried to help, pressing a hand to her mother's shoulder. "It's okay, Mommy. I'm here," she whispered. The first responders arrived within minutes, though to them the scene was immediately disorienting. Blood trails led from the bedroom to the living room. A vase had shattered against the wall, and a chair had been thrown across the hallway. There were no signs of forced entry. Windows were locked, doors bolted. The house had been breached, but somehow no doors had been kicked in. Police and paramedics worked quickly, lifting Meyer onto a stretcher while Lily sobbed uncontrollably. Officers began questioning the girl, trying to piece together what had happened. "Lily," one asked gently, "who hurt your mother?" Lily hesitated. Her small mouth trembled, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a man," she said, glancing at Aarav, eyes wide. Like Dad's friend, Ethan. He's big like Dad." The officer's brow furrowed. The detail was unsettling. Not only did the child identify someone known to the family, but she described his size, his build, and the way he moved in a way that felt specific, personal. It immediately focused the investigation towards someone within Aarav's circle. Aarav remained at Maya's side, eyes darting from his daughter to the first responders, speaking calmly, repeating instructions. But there was a subtle dissonance in his voice, a measured precision that didn't fully align with the sheer horror of the scene. Officers noted it silently, cataloging every word, every gesture. When the first officer glanced at Aarav's phone, intending to check any recent calls for context, he noticed something strange. The device normally showing a detailed call and text history was wiped clean, completely devoid of the previous 30 minutes of activity. The officer's hand froze. "Sir, when did you clear your phone?" Aarav's eyes flicked briefly toward the device. I didn't. It must be a glitch. Maybe some app update." His tone was steady, almost rehearsed. The officers exchanged skeptical glances. The timing was too precise. Wiped minutes before the 911 call. Too convenient to ignore. Paramedics wheeled Maya toward the ambulance, her groans of pain echoing down the hallway. Lily was ushered to a nearby officer, still shaking, small body trembling. Aarav followed, voice calm, composed, every step measured. The chaotic scene around him, the blood, the broken furniture, the terror in his daughter's eyes, seemed to move in slow motion, every detail burned into the minds of the first responders. And yet, behind the calm, rational facade, an invisible thread of doubt had been planted. Something about the timing, the cleared phone, the intruder's precise knowledge of the house. It was too orchestrated, too perfect, too deliberate. The morning after the attack, the house was sealed off with yellow police tape, the scent of disinfectant and copper still lingering in the air. Detectives moved methodically, photographing every surface, bagging every object that could hold even the faintest trace of DNA. In the chaos, one thing had already become clear. This was not a random burglary. Every detail, how the intruder had moved, what he had broken, and the utter familiarity with the house layout, suggested a carefully orchestrated plan. Detective Laura Benton sat in the command van outside the house, laptop open, tracing digital breadcrumbs that could finally explain the night's horror. The first breakthrough came from Aarav's phone, the same device that had been mysteriously wiped minutes before the 911 call. Using forensic recovery software, Benton's team retrieved fragments of deleted messages. They were brief, cryptic, but telling: coordinates, dates, times, references to cash transfers. The messages read like a clandestine meeting agenda. Pick up the car at 11, make sure she's not home, payment is ready. Others mentioned locations only someone close to a household would know. One text even instructed the recipient to avoid cameras on Hawthorne Lane. Check the back for entry. Benton's eyes narrowed as she traced the numbers back to a familiar name: Ethan Cole, a longtime friend of Aarav's and a former employee of his small tech firm. The combination of proximity, personal knowledge, and digital evidence suggested the involvement of someone with inside access. But the digital trail was only part of the story. Financial forensics added another layer of motive. Investigators discovered that Aarav had recently doubled Maya's life insurance policy. The increase, executed just 3 weeks before the attack, raised the payout to nearly $1 million. Bank records showed a new premium schedule, signed electronically and immediately confirmed. It was subtle but strategic, exactly the kind of detail that could indicate premeditation. Next, surveillance footage was obtained from neighborhood cameras and nearby streets. Grainy, blackened, white images showed a dark sedan, matching Ethan's car, parked near the Mehta residence around 11:45 p.m. It lingered just long enough for someone to step inside the property unnoticed. In the footage, the angle caught a glimpse of a figure carrying something bulky, though the resolution was insufficient to determine identity. Detectives began to map the timeline. Aarav leaves for poker at 10 p.m. The messages between him and Ethan escalate around 11 p.m. Ethan's car appears near the house at 11:45 p.m. The attack occurs around 12:15 a.m. and the 911 call comes at 12:22 a.m. Each digital footprint, each transaction, each movement confirmed that this was a coordinated, carefully timed operation, not a spontaneous act of violence. Benton leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "This isn't just a break-in," she muttered to her partner. "Someone planned every detail to the second. Whoever did this had access, knowledge, and motive, and it's someone Aarav knows." While the team worked on the digital and financial evidence, interviews with neighbors provided corroboration. Several had noticed a car circling the block multiple times that night. Some remembered headlights briefly illuminating the driveway, suggesting someone had been inside the property without drawing attention. None saw Aarav's SUV until he returned after poker, confirming his alibi. But Ethan's movements remained suspiciously unaccounted for. When Ethan was brought in for questioning, the detectives confronted him with the timeline and the messages. At first, he maintained silence, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Then, after hours of interrogation, the dam broke. Ethan confessed, but his words were carefully measured, designed to cast blame elsewhere. "Aarav, he told me she wouldn't be home," Ethan said, voice shaking. "He said the night would be clear, that it was just supposed to scare her. I didn't know she'd be hurt, I swear." The confession sent shockwaves through the investigative team. The details he revealed aligned with what the deleted messages had suggested. The coordination, the timing, the instructions about cameras and entry points. Yet he positioned Aarav as the orchestrator, claiming that he, Ethan, had been manipulated into acting under false pretenses. Benton frowned, considering the implications. If Ethan's account was truthful, then the fingerprints of premeditation pointed directly at Aarav, and the motive was unmistakably financial. But if Ethan was lying, it was possible he had acted alone or had another, more sinister reason for the attack. Either way, the story was growing more complicated by the hour. Forensics, digital recovery, and financial evidence formed a converging pattern. Someone with knowledge, access, and incentive had orchestrated the break-in. Each new piece of recovered data painted a more damning picture. Coordinates sent via encrypted messages, timestamps lining up with Ethan's movements, bank records showing Aarav's insurance policy increase, and video footage placing Ethan near the scene at the exact time. Benton's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she pulled up the last recovered message. The words were chilling in their simplicity. "Do it tonight. Don't fail me. Payment is ready." The context was unmistakable. Someone had planned this. Someone close to the family had wanted Maya Mehta gone, and now Ethan had confessed. But his words hinted at a disturbing possibility. The man behind the plan may have been right under their noses all along. The morning air outside the Mehta residence was crisp, tinged with the faint smell of wet leaves and damp asphalt. By the time Detective Laura Benton's team arrived at Ethan Cole's apartment, the tension was palpable. The man they were about to arrest had been a close friend of Aarav's for years, a trusted colleague, someone whose presence in the house had seemed harmless. Now, every interaction with him carried the weight of suspicion and betrayal. The officers knocked firmly on the door. Ethan appeared almost immediately, his expression a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Behind him, the apartment was cramped but orderly, books stacked neatly on shelves, clothes folded in drawers, nothing indicating chaos or premeditation. At least not on the surface. Ethan Cole, you are under arrest for your involvement in the assault on Maya Mehta," Benton announced, her voice steady, professional. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he made no sudden movements. He raised his hands in compliance, a flicker of resignation crossing his face. As he was handcuffed and escorted to the patrol car, Ethan's mind raced. He knew the detectives already had digital evidence linking him to the night of the attack, the deleted messages and surveillance footage placing his vehicle near the Mehta home. But he still clung to a thread of hope. He could tell his story in a way that shifted blame, at least partially, to Aarav. In the interrogation room, the stark fluorescent lights reflected off the cold metal table. Ethan sat across from Detective Benton, his hands fidgeting, eyes darting nervously. Benton placed the recovered messages, photos of the crime scene, and screenshots of bank records in front of him. "Start talking, Ethan," Benton said, voice firm. "We know everything, the messages, the times, the payment. The moment you admit what happened, we can explain the full story, make it easier on yourself." Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered, voice trembling. "Aarav, he told me it was supposed to be a scare, just a break-in. No one was supposed to get hurt. He said Maya wouldn't even be home that night, but when I got there..." His hands shook as he gestured. "I saw her. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I tried to stop it, but it was too late. It went wrong." The words sent a chill through Benton. The story aligned with some of the evidence, yet it didn't explain the physical proof of a struggle. She leaned forward, studying him. "And the blood on your jeans, Ethan, the broken furniture. How do you explain that?" Ethan looked away, jaw tight. "She fought. I tried to. I didn't want to hurt her, I swear. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Prosecutors, sitting silently behind the observation glass, already noted the discrepancies. Digital evidence placed Ethan's movements at precise intervals near the Mehta residence. The texts and calls indicated planning and coordination. And now, forensic reports confirmed blood matching Maya's DNA on Ethan's jeans and shoes. The combination made his story tenuous at best. Aarav, meanwhile, had been brought in for questioning but maintained a calm, almost detached demeanor. When asked about his connection to Ethan and the night's events, he insisted vehemently. Ethan acted alone, out of jealousy. "I had nothing to do with this. I trusted him, completely." His tone was measured, almost rehearsed, but the detectives weren't convinced. Every action, every deleted message, every digital trail suggested otherwise. Ethan's confession, while chilling, introduced a new complexity. If Aarav had hired him, the motive was now undeniable. Insurance documents revealed a sudden, significant increase in Maya's life insurance policy, coupled with financial strain that made the payout enticing. The detectives started to see a pattern. Someone close to Aarav, with access and incentive, orchestrated this, but the full extent of Aarav's involvement remained unclear. Forensics continued their meticulous work. Every surface Ethan had touched in the Mehta house had been swabbed. The pattern of blood spatter indicated that Maya had attempted to fight back, that the struggle had moved from the hallway to the living room. Objects were displaced, broken, and bloodied in ways that suggested an unexpected level of violence. Detective Benton finally called in a search of Ethan's belongings. His backpack, left in the corner of his apartment, was unzipped carefully. Files, personal items, and clothing were removed one by one. Then, tucked in a hidden compartment, they found it. Aarav's spare house key. Benton held it up, voice low but filled with tension. "Well, this changes everything." Ethan's eyes widened, panic surfacing for the first time. He stammered, trying to explain, but the implication was already clear. The key confirmed a level of access that matched the planning evident in the digital and forensic evidence. Whoever had orchestrated this had ensured Ethan could enter the house without forcing locks. The pieces of the puzzle, texts, timestamps, surveillance footage, blood evidence, and now the spare key, pointed increasingly toward premeditation and collaboration. For Aarav, the evidence stacking against him grew heavier by the hour. While Ethan's confession suggested Aarav had instructed him to stage the break-in, the forensic reality of the night painted a darker, more deliberate picture. Detectives exchanged glances. realizing they were on the cusp of uncovering the full truth. And in that moment, the investigation pivoted from speculation to certainty. The plan had not only been executed, it had left a trail, digital, physical, and financial, that could no longer be ignored. The courtroom was packed to the brim. Spectators lined every available seat. Reporters scribbled furiously in the back, and cameras from local news stations captured every angle. This was more than a trial, it had become a spectacle, the kind of high-profile legal battle that captivated the town and beyond. Aarav Mehta sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped, his face impassive, yet every subtle movement betrayed the tension coursing beneath the surface. Beside him, his attorneys shuffled documents, reviewing every piece of evidence that could possibly counter the mounting case. The prosecution began methodically, presenting the narrative like clockwork. Digital messages between Aarav and Ethan were displayed on a large monitor for the jury. Texts detailing coordinates, timestamps, and references to money made the air in the courtroom almost suffocating. Benton and her team emphasized the orchestration. The messages weren't casual exchanges. They were precise instructions for a break-in that escalated into a violent attack. Next, financial records were introduced. The jury saw the sudden, dramatic increase in Maya's life insurance policy, signed electronically just weeks before the attack. The prosecution highlighted the timing, showing how it coincided with the planning messages sent to Ethan. The suggestion was clear. Financial motive, opportunity, and prior knowledge converged into a deliberate, premeditated plan. GPS logs were brought forward as well. Ethan's movements that night were traced with startling precision. The footage from neighborhood surveillance cameras was combined with phone location data, establishing a timeline that left little room for doubt. Ethan's dark sedan appeared near the Mehta residence minutes before the break-in, just as the digital messages predicted. Every motion, every stop, every pause was cataloged for the jury, creating a meticulous map of the events leading up to the attack. Then came Lily's testimony. The 8-year-old girl, small and fragile in the witness stand, recounted her mother's struggle with uncanny clarity. Her voice trembled at first, but she spoke with the conviction of someone reliving a nightmare she could not forget. He was big like Dad, she said quietly, tears welling in her eyes. He hit Mommy and she told me to run. I hugged her leg, and then he came after us. The courtroom fell silent. The jurors leaned forward, absorbing the weight of the child's words. Benton guided Lily through her memory gently, letting her describe what she saw without suggestion. The combination of her testimony with the forensic reconstruction of Maya's last moments painted a chilling picture. A mother fighting for her life, a child helplessly witnessing the violence, and a calculated intruder who knew the house too well to be a stranger. Defense attorneys countered, focusing on procedural criticism. They argued that the police had fixated on Aarav too early, that the investigation was biased, and that Ethan could have acted independently. They questioned the reliability of deleted messages, suggesting they could have been misinterpreted or manipulated. They downplayed the GPS and surveillance evidence, claiming circumstantial connections were being treated as definitive proof. Ethan was called to the stand next. His demeanor had shifted. He appeared calmer, composed, as though he had rehearsed his testimony in front of a mirror countless times. He recounted the events from his perspective, again attempting to place responsibility on Aarav. He claimed the break-in was intended as a scare, that he had been instructed to enter the house only when Maya was supposedly away, and that Aarav's messages had guided his every move. The jurors listened, some frowning, others nodding slightly, but the prosecution quickly reminded the court of Ethan's inconsistencies and the physical evidence: blood on his clothing, the spare key in his backpack, and surveillance footage placing him at the scene. Psychological tension thickened as forensic experts reconstructed Maya's final moments. Using blood spatter analysis, trajectory mapping, and furniture displacement studies, they demonstrated the struggle in painstaking detail. Each movement, each strike, and each defensive action was replayed visually, emphasizing the brutality and deliberate nature of the attack. Maya's courage, her instinct to protect Lily, and the calculated force used by the intruder were all laid bare. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Every juror, every spectator, could feel the weight of the narrative pressing down, a home invasion orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge, financial motive, and a willingness to manipulate others to achieve his goal. The defense tried to defuse it, but the combination of digital, forensic, and eyewitness evidence created a narrative that was almost impossible to counter. And then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, the prosecution prepared their most damning piece of evidence yet. Benton stood, holding a small device, and announced that a recovered voicemail had been found, deleted, but restored by digital forensics. The court held its collective breath as the audio file was queued up. The recording was Aarav's voice, calm, deliberate, and unmistakable, speaking directly to Ethan. "You know the plan. She won't be home, just like we discussed. Make sure it goes smoothly, and the payment will be waiting." A hush fell over the room. Jurors leaned forward. Even the defense attorneys froze for a brief moment, realizing the weight of the recording. The voicemail was irrefutable evidence of planning, coordination, and intent. It tied Aarav directly to Ethan's actions in a way that no text message, bank record, or GPS log could fully achieve. The courtroom seemed to shrink around Aarav. Every eye was on him. Every word of that voicemail hung in the air like a shadow over the proceedings. The stakes had never been higher, the tension never more palpable. And for the jurors, the next moments would define the fate of a man whose calm facade was now shattered by the evidence of his own voice. The courtroom was dead silent as the audio system hummed softly. Every person present, jurors, spectators, even court staff, leaned in, straining to catch each word. Benton's hands were steady as she cued the recording. Aarav Mehta, once composed and unshakable, now sat rigidly, eyes fixed on the table before him, lips pressed together. He had denied everything for weeks, but this voicemail carried the weight of irrefutable truth. A clear, calm voice filled the courtroom. "Tonight, make sure she can't fight back. You know what to do. Payment will be ready." Aarav's face went pale. A faint tremor ran through his hands as he gripped the table's edge. The audio repeated once, twice, and each time, the dam of his composure cracked a little further. The prosecution paused, letting the silence underscore the gravity of the message. Every juror felt the room grow heavier, the air thick with disbelief and tension. Detective Benton turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice measured but insistent, "this recording is a window into the premeditation behind the attack on Maya Mehta. You just heard Aarav Mehta instruct someone to ensure that his wife could not defend herself. He coordinated the crime, using a trusted friend, to commit a violent, intentional act for personal gain. The motive was laid bare next." Prosecutors methodically outlined the financial and emotional incentives driving the crime. The recently increased life insurance policy worth nearly $1 million, Aarav's ongoing affairs, his desire to end his marriage without losing financial security, and long-standing resentment toward Maya for refusing to acquiesce to his demands. Every word was deliberate, painting a portrait of a man willing to manipulate, betray, and endanger the lives of those closest to him for personal freedom and profit. Aarav's hands now trembled visibly. He closed his eyes, shoulders slumping slightly, as the prosecution's narrative continued. The psychological weight of the evidence pressed down, and the courtroom sensed a shift. This was no longer a hypothetical argument. This was a man exposed. Then, the focus shifted to Lily. The young girl, small and solemn, walked to the witness stand again. She gripped the edges of the railing, trying to steady her voice. Her eyes, wide and unwavering, met the jury's as she recounted what she had seen that night. "The man. He called my mommy a problem," she said, voice quivering but clear. "I tried to hide, but I saw him hit her. Mommy told me to run. I tried to help her. I hugged her leg and he kept hitting her." The courtroom was engulfed in silence. Even Aarav's defense attorneys had no words to counter the gravity of a child reliving the trauma of watching her mother attacked. Each juror shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the scene pressing on their conscience. The prosecution connected Lily's testimony to the voicemail and the forensic evidence. Blood spatter analysis, trajectory mapping, and the recovered spare key were all shown to the jury. Each piece reinforced that the intruder Ethan was acting under direct instructions from Aarav. The sequence of events, the premeditated timing, and the deliberate planning became impossible to dispute. Aarav's composure shattered entirely when the audio was replayed one final time. His face paled, a sheen of sweat forming on his forehead. His breathing became erratic. The courtroom watched as a man, long shielded by denial, finally crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. His knuckles whitened against the table, and for the first time he looked genuinely afraid, not just for his freedom, but for the exposure of his actions. Defense counsel rose to challenge the recording's authenticity, but Benton had anticipated it. Technical experts confirmed the voicemail's origin, metadata, and timestamp. The court was presented with evidence that the file had been recovered intact from Ethan's device, verifying its legitimacy. The audio was irrefutable. The instructions had come directly from Aarav, linking him explicitly to the night's events. The prosecution leaned into the emotional impact, describing the trauma inflicted on Maya and Lily. They emphasized the betrayal inherent in the crime, the use of a trusted friend to enter a family home, the violence witnessed by a child, and the cold calculation of a husband who orchestrated the attack for personal gain. The courtroom hung on every word, the tension nearly unbearable. And then, as the judge prepared to recess for the day, a startling interruption came. Aarav's voice rang out unexpectedly. I want to testify." The courtroom froze. Murmurs rippled through the gallery as the judge paused, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Mehta, you understand your rights. Do you wish to waive your right to remain silent and testify voluntarily?" Aarav's lips quivered, but he nodded. "Yes, I need to tell my side." The air thickened with anticipation. Reporters scribbled furiously. The jury exchanged uncertain glances. For the first time, the man at the center of the nightmare would speak directly, his own words poised to either explain, justify, or further condemn him. The weight of the trial had reached its apex, and every eye in the room was fixed on Aarav, waiting to hear what he would reveal next. The stage was set for the final, crucial act. The courtroom held its collective breath as Aarav prepared to give testimony that could either save him or seal his fate. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as Aarav Mehta stood to testify, his body rigid, jaw tight, and eyes darting nervously between the judge, the jury, and the prosecution table. He cleared his throat, trying to steady a voice that trembled despite the months of preparation and his usual calculated composure. The spectators leaned forward, the air thick with anticipation. Every word Aarav would speak could tip the scale of the trial irreversibly. I made mistakes," he began, almost whispering. "I planned an insurance strategy, a way to alleviate financial strain, but I never wanted Maya to be hurt. I never," Detective Benton and the prosecution exchanged a quiet glance. The pause hung in the air, almost defiant, yet fraught with tension. The prosecutor, a seasoned woman named Rachel Patel, leaned forward, her tone steady but pointed. "Mr. Mehta, you've admitted to planning a scheme to benefit financially from your wife. Can you explain why the messages recovered from your phone specifically instructed Ethan Cole to ensure your wife could not resist?" Aarav's gaze dropped. I didn't think she'd be home. Ethan was. Supposed to scare her, not harm her." The words barely registered with the jurors as Patel produced a series of exhibits, digital search history, screenshots from his computer, and phone logs. On one screen, highlighted text glared at the courtroom. "Can you knock someone unconscious fast?" Another showed repeated searches for ways to disable home security systems, followed by queries about timing and surveillance evasion. The jurors shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. His carefully constructed defense, claiming ignorance and intent to merely scare, was crumbling under the weight of tangible evidence. Each exhibit seemed to paint a more sinister picture than his words attempted to justify. "You didn't think she'd be home," Patel pressed, voice unwavering. "Yet you researched exactly how to incapacitate someone, break into a home, and avoid detection. How do you reconcile these actions with your claim that you never intended her harm? Aarav's hands shook visibly as he gripped the edge of the witness stand. I didn't plan for her to be there. I only wanted to stage the break-in just to collect the policy. Patel's eyes narrowed. And the voicemail you left for Ethan Cole, instructing him to ensure she couldn't fight back. How do you explain that? Aarav's voice wavered, almost pleading. I didn't. I meant that metaphorically. I wanted him to scare her, not to physically hurt her. I never intended. I never. The courtroom was silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Every juror was now fully engaged, their expressions a mixture of disbelief, shock, and growing suspicion. The spectators leaned forward, some clutching notebooks, others holding their heads in disbelief. The defense attorneys exchanged worried glances. Their strategy of casting doubt was being systematically dismantled by Aarav's own words, paired with undeniable digital and forensic evidence. The prosecution pressed on, drawing attention to his extramarital affairs. Witnesses from the tech firm and social circles confirmed his multiple relationships, detailing conversations in which Aarav expressed frustration over his marriage and a desire for freedom. Each testimony was punctuated by texts and emails, demonstrating a consistent pattern of deception and manipulation. Aarav's posture stiffened, his eyes darting toward his defense counsel, as if silently pleading for intervention. But nothing could shield him from the combined force of forensic, digital, and testimonial evidence converging in the courtroom. Every exhibit, every witness, and every recovered message chipped away at his defense, revealing a man far more calculated and far more culpable than his testimony suggested. The final blow came when the prosecution displayed a timeline of the night in question, overlaying Ethan's movements, GPS data, and the precise timestamps of Aarav's communications. The jury could see clearly how closely coordinated the break-in had been with Aarav's instructions. Each piece of evidence contradicted his claim of ignorance, highlighting the chilling reality that his planning had directly enabled the attack. The judge's patience was now visibly fraying. Aarav, attempting to clarify and justify, stumbled through half-formed explanations and rationalizations. Mr. Mehta, do you understand that your testimony is being viewed as self-incriminating? The judge admonished, voice sharp but controlled. You must answer clearly. You are not clarifying, you are admitting to planning, and your statements are being taken literally by this court. Aarav nodded shakily, swallowing hard. His eyes darted toward the jury, and for the first time, his calculated facade cracked completely. He looked small, vulnerable, and cornered by the weight of his own words. The courtroom atmosphere was electric with tension. The jurors were silent, but visibly reacting, some leaning forward, others exchanging glances of disbelief. For the spectators, it was a moment of high drama, watching a man who had controlled every aspect of his public and private life finally exposed by the very evidence he had tried to manipulate. The combination of his testimony, the voicemail, the digital footprints, and the forensic reconstruction created a psychological weight that no courtroom observer could ignore. The attorneys wrapped up their questioning, the jury scribbling furiously in their notebooks, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The tension was so thick it felt almost tangible. Benton exchanged a brief glance with her team, sensing that the trial had reached its apex. The truth was now fully laid bare, and the jury had all the information they needed to deliberate. Then the judge spoke, finalizing the day's proceedings. The court will now recess for jury deliberation. Members of the jury, please consider all evidence presented and return with a verdict in due course. A murmur passed through the courtroom. Jurors filed out to begin their deliberation, and within less than 2 hours, the moment of reckoning would arrive. All eyes remained on the jury room door, knowing that in a matter of hours, the fate of Aarav Mehta and the story of my Mehta's tragic last night would be sealed. The tension in the Stewart County courtroom was palpable as the jury filed back in after less than 2 hours of deliberation. Spectators, reporters, and family members sat rigidly, holding their collective breath. Aarav Mehta remained motionless, hands clasped tightly on the table, staring straight ahead as if willing the room to dissolve around him. His defense attorneys exchanged anxious glances. The brevity of deliberation suggested the jury had reached a near-unanimous decision quickly. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, hands trembling slightly, and responded, "Yes, Your Honor, we have." A silence settled over the courtroom like a weight. Every eye was fixed on the jury as the verdict was read aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Aarav Mehta, guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Maya Mehta, and guilty of conspiracy to commit murder." The words echoed like a clap of thunder. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gallery. Aarav's face remained stoic for a moment. Then a flicker of disbelief passed across his features. His defense attorneys sank into their chairs, heads bowed, while the prosecution exchanged subtle, restrained nods, their careful work now validated by the jury's swift decision. Aarav was led back to the holding area for the sentencing phase. The courtroom reconvened later that afternoon for the formal sentencing. The judge's voice was solemn as he declared, "Considering the nature of the crime, the premeditation, and the emotional devastation inflicted upon the victim's family, the defendant is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Aarav's eyes finally betrayed the first glimmer of fear. He slumped in his seat, muttering something under his breath that no one else could hear. The courtroom was silent but for the shuffling of papers and the occasional sniffle from the gallery. This was the legal closure, but the emotional impact lingered far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Ethan Cole's fate was determined shortly thereafter. As part of a separate proceeding, he received a sentence reflecting his participation in the attack, a term of 30 years with eligibility for parole after 25, factoring in his cooperation during the trial and his partial confession. While his punishment was severe, the court recognized that the orchestrator, the mastermind, was Aarav, whose influence and planning had escalated a criminal scheme into a murder. Outside the courtroom, the focus shifted to the survivors. Lily Mehta, barely 9 and forever scarred by witnessing her mother's death, was now in the care of Maya's sister, Anika Kapoor. Standing in the sunlight outside the courthouse, Anika embraced her niece tightly, whispering promises that would become a lifeline in the months and years ahead. "You are safe now, Lily. Your mommy's love is with us always," Anika said, her voice trembling. "We'll keep her memory alive, every day, in every choice we make." Lily clung to her aunt, the words sinking in, her small frame shaking but finding comfort in the promise of family and continuity. Anika later completed the legal process to formally adopt Lily, and the girl moved into her aunt's home with her younger brother. The pair now surrounded by support, protection, and the unbroken bond of family despite their loss. Meanwhile, the digital evidence remained a grim testament to the events that had transpired. Voicemails, text messages, and search history revealed the cold and calculated planning Aarav had employed, leaving no ambiguity about his role. Though he continued to insist, even during hearings and in private conversations, that he never touched her. The forensic trail painted a damning portrait: instructions, coordination, and enabling actions that made him directly responsible for the crime. The courtroom's verdict had codified that truth into legal consequence, but the psychological and emotional ramifications were far deeper, leaving scars on all who had been touched by the tragedy. Anika Kapoor, meanwhile, found solace in creating a small memorial for Maya within her home. A photograph, a few of Maya's favorite belongings, and letters written by Lily recounting memories she could still hold on to. Each day, the children spoke of their mother, not in fear, but with a mixture of love and remembrance, a deliberate act to keep her light alive in their lives. The community, too, rallied, offering support, counseling, and the reminder that while Aarav's actions had irrevocably shattered their world, justice had been served. Yet even with the courtroom proceedings complete, a shadow lingered. Weeks after Aarav's sentencing, investigators reopened an older insurance claim linked to him, predating Maya's policy increase. Patterns in documentation, financial records, and unexplained anomalies suggested a history of schemes, carefully orchestrated, potentially malicious, and previously undetected. Detectives quietly noted the connections, realizing that while Aarav had been brought to justice for Maya's death, this may have been far from his first attempt at manipulation, fraud, or worse. The implication was chilling. It suggested a pattern of premeditation and calculated risk that extended beyond a single crime. Aarav's life sentence could not undo his previous actions, nor erase the potential harm that may have gone unnoticed. For the investigators, the work was far from over. For the community, it was a reminder that evil sometimes hides in the familiar, in trusted relationships, until the consequences become impossible to ignore. In the end, justice had been served, but the echo of Maya Mehta's life and the innocence lost on that quiet Tuesday night would linger. Lily and her brother, now enveloped in family and love, were left to navigate a world forever changed. Aarav Mehta, behind bars, remained unrepentant in his claims, even as every piece of digital evidence cemented his guilt. And in the quiet halls of the police department, officers reviewed the reopened claim, the documents, and the digital footprint of Aarav's past actions. The message was clear. While one crime had been resolved, the possibility of more manipulation, more planning, and more deception waited, hidden in the shadows of a man whose capacity for calculated wrongdoing was now fully exposed.